My name is Dr. Regine Jean Charles, and I am an Associate Professor of Romance Languages and Literatures and African Diaspora Studies at Boston College. I am a Black feminist literary scholar, and my areas of research include Francophone Africa and the Caribbean, as well as global Black feminist literatures. And I teach classes on a range of topics, including, right now I'm teaching a class on rape culture that's called Where Black Lives Matter meets #MeToo. I've taught a lot of classes on Haiti. I teach classes on African and Caribbean women writers, and I teach a class on African film. So I would start off by saying that the term third world is actually very outdated. And that those of us who are actually in the field where we're working on parts of Africa and the Caribbean or Black and brown people all over the world stopped using that term maybe at least a decade ago. And I think the problem with third world is that it connotes that there's a first world, a second world, and a third world, right? So already you're operating according to this logic of hierarchy, and the assumption would be that the people from the third world are in third place. A better term that we use in my field and many others is global south, which is also a way of kind of recognizing that there is it's in a way a difference, but that's not necessarily a hierarchy, right? So when you say this north-south divide in many places all over the world, the southern part of the country tends to be less privileged than the northern part of the country. And so when we talk about north-south relations in a global sense, that's part of what we're talking about. The other problem with third world to me is that it doesn't acknowledge the ways in which the status or some of the history or the contemporary situation of those in the so-called third world has been directly impacted by those in the first world. So for example, it doesn't acknowledge, the third world wouldn't be the third world if it weren't for the legacy of colonialism. Colonialism, right? That it started because of those in the first world. So global south is, to me, and to many of us within the field, a better way of categorizing that group of people. The title of my book is Conflict Bodies: The Politics of Rape Representation in the Francophone Imaginary. And basically I argue that because of colonialism, because of genocide, because of wars, because of slavery, because of all of these different historic and political factors, the problem of violence has been represented a lot. And when I say representation, I'm talking about films, I'm talking about novels, poetry, drama, a wide range of what we call cultural production. So the problem of violence has been written about a lot, but that less attention has been given to the problem of gender-based violence, specifically rape. And what I offer in my book is a way for thinking about violence in general by starting with sexual violence. And I identify the ways that sexual violence has been normalized, has been denied, has been ignored or allegorized. And I offer a way to read texts that really focus on what do we mean when we talk about sexual violence. So for example, people will say the rape of the African continent to talk about colonialism. And my problem with that is that it really erases the experience of people who actually have survived rape in that context. So I say, what happens if instead of thinking about just this conflict, let's look at these bodies and how they've been affected by these various forms of violence.
Haiti is always is referred to as the poor. I know you hate this. I know you hate it. Okay. But I'm only bringing this up to refute it and to educate people on why we should stop saying. Okay. Many times referred to as the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Yep. Right. Could you kind of quickly go over why we should stop saying that and the reasons why how Haiti got into that position?
Right. Okay. So there's a Haitian journalist by the name of Joël Dreyfus who says he calls that phrase the phrase in a box. And he says that it's a metaphorical prison because even though it is factually accurate, it is it empties out everything else, right? It reduces Haiti to one thing, and this is what Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie talks about, right? The danger of a single story. So that phrase has become a single story about Haiti, where that's all that we see and that's all that we know about. Historians, writers, scholars that work on Haiti, we say, even though it is maybe economically poor, it is very culturally and historically rich. And so again, when you focus on that economic poverty, then that also sometimes blinds people to what are the other riches that we have. And so the first Black republic in the world, the only place where a group of enslaved Africans were able to throw over their colonizers and to become a nation, a self-governed nation. But then they were, of course, they were penalized for that afterwards, and there was an indemnity that they had to pay. So for many years, we had this debt that we had to pay to France. And then there were even countries such as the US for over 50 years didn't even recognize Haiti as a sovereign country. And so what that meant was that globally, we were not able to trade with other countries, right? So the fact that we got our independence in 1804, and then it was not recognized by other countries around the world, that then led us into this kind of downward spiral. Similarly, with the debt that was owed to France, right? And so there are ways in which our economy was actually crippled. And I think that what's really important for us to remember about that is that this is also just about Blackness, right? It's about anti-Blackness to the extreme, because nobody could understand how a group of formerly enslaved Africans could deign to not, or enslaved Africans could deign to say no to the violence, to the oppression, to slavery, to the system that was the economic engine of the 18th, 19th centuries, right? And 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. But the economic engine for so many European countries, right? And that's how they built their wealth, right? The wealth of the United States and many European countries was literally as a result of the system of slavery. And so the French were, they did approach it from an economic perspective, in the sense that they felt like they were owed financially because of the fact that the enslaved Africans felt that their lives mattered enough, right? That their humanity mattered. Their assertion of their humanity, again, for them was, for the Europeans, there was an economic calculus, right? That they measured that by.
With your experience, your knowledge, what is an encouragement to people who are looking at these issues of impacting women in the global South? What are some things that we should be looking at, or ways that we can work as lawyers to alleviate some of these issues that impact these women?
That's good. That's a great question. I think, you just attended the class that I was in. One of the things I think that one of the things that I would encourage lawyers to do especially is to understand what intersectionality is and to think in an intersectional way. Understand what intersectionality is and to think in an intersectional way, so that when you see an issue, in fact, the idea of intersectionality that was created by a lawyer, right, Kimberly Crenshaw, she first coined that term in the 90s. And when she did, it was actually in a law review essay in which she was talking about rape, was her example. And so as you approach these issues, don't think just, okay, this is a woman, this is a Haitian woman, or this is a Black woman living in Mattapan, right, or living in Cambridge. Think, okay, she's a Black woman. She's a Haitian woman. She might be an undocumented woman. Okay, maybe this is why, her partner, if her partner has domestically abused her, this is why it might be. These are all the factors that might come into play that make it difficult for her to want to prosecute, right? So I would encourage lawyers to really use intersectionality as the tool of what it is, and that's going to help you to better serve your clients, better serve your community. And that's true of any issues, right? I think that we talked today in the class about the way that transgender youth are being killed by police, also, right? The way that they might be criminalized. So again, think a little bit like a sociologist, like my colleague, right? So broaden to say, well, what are the different issues that might be affecting this person? What are the different issues at play? And that would allow me to better help this person in their situation. And then I would also say, think, like a literary scholar, think like a cultural critic, and think about the words that you're using. Think about the symbols that you're using. Think about, don't say, oh yeah, you're from Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. But think about how the images maybe that you have seen or the things that you've heard about this place are also influencing your own, they call it implicit bias, and everyone wants to talk about that. But I think that those are two things I would say. The last thing I would just say about the question, issues affecting women in the Global South, I will never forget when I was in graduate school, the first time I went to Senegal, and we had, it was like the Ministry of Women Affairs came and I went to a talk by her, and one of the things that she said was notice how many girls are out in the street, and notice the children on the streets and see what they're doing when they're outside. And the point was that a lot of times the girls were working, whereas a lot of times the boys were playing. And I think for me, as a parent of both sons and daughters, this is something that I think about a lot. And the project that I'm working on now is actually about Haitian girls and Haitian girlhood. And I would say that that's, one issue, again, a manifestation of patriarchy that is global. But that's one of the ways that it gets played out, right? Is that you see these girls like carrying these heavy, heavy things of water, or girls holding babies and taking care of babies, and how infrequently we see girls just left to play, to experience that Black girl magic. So that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Jean Charles. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.